it'll be more preliminary than what the title, which, as I see it now, might look arrogant in a way. Anyway, I'm coming more from analytical part of the philosophy, so I'll try to give some modest but I hope provocative injunctions to the discussion, and I think it would be the best for me just to read. So, in our attempt to understand the world, we take as for granted that the reality is something entirely independent from us, unless we acquire the knowledge of what there is. It's the way it should be. A theory is a kind of reflection of some independent reality which precedes any theory, and the best theory is the one which best fits the data coming from the reality. We may call those data facts. But what are the facts? In this short paper, I would like to offer a few modest remarks with the hope they will be provocative enough to be worth of the discussion. So the provocation is the actual purpose of this short contribution. Two basic, though simple preliminaries. First, when we say facts, we mean the contents of sentences which come as answers to questions of the type, what is the case? Saying that something is the case. At some point, however, we should see that there are two kinds of facts. Brute facts, consisting of a set of all things, the events in the natural world, the existence of which is really independent of us or our believing that they exist. They exist entirely independently of anything what we say or can say. And institutional facts, containing facts that exist only because we believe they exist, as John Searle devised in his work in much more complex and precise way. We may notice that I do not consider Ferrari's ideal objects as fit to constitute facts, which might be only a matter of approach or terminology. But we may raise the question, do mathematical statements contain any facts? Second, institutional facts are different from the values, which are not the facts in this sense. The values are the content of sentences which come as answers to questions of the type what we want to be the case. And the sentences, such a sentence does not say anything about the existence. The values are thus created by the act of the will to posit something as a goal we are interested in. Something that no one is interested in has no value. The important difference between values and institutional facts is that values do not exist in the sense in which institutional facts do. Namely, they are not true or false answers to questions, what is the case? There is no case here. I will not go further into details regarding this, presuming it is well known from Searle's many works. What I intend to explore are some minor issues regarding two things. One being how what I call reciprocal elimination between theory and facts functions in the realm of institutional facts. And second, to explore in some details the function of irreversibility that is crucial for institutional facts. First, reciprocal elimination. In our approach to what there is, we may presume a catalog of particular things that exist in the world, that's Ferrari's phrasing, saying that what there is, where and when it is, how ordered it is, and how to distinguish it from the rest of the world, from anything else there. But to know all this, we have to take a standpoint from which we can approach. And certainly what can be seen from a certain point may be different from what can be seen from some other point. The presupposition or presumption here is that what there is entirely independent from where we stand and will be always the same. The sameness of what there is untouched by differences in our approach or approaches. The difference is entirely on us. We can approach only to a part of us or aspect of the reality, something that Marcus has in his 3 or how many, it's not certain advanced objects. or aspects of the reality we are approaching, and we are the side which should accommodate if we are not satisfied with the result. We can designate this as the ontological point of view. The reality is out there, regardless of what we know or believe. And certainly there is a sense in which all facts are independent in this way. Even for institutional facts, which exist only because we believe they do, having their essence absolutely dependent on such belief, we have this same independence. This is what Ferrari thinks by saying that social objects depend on subjects, but are not subjective. However, there is still not only a limit determined by the restricting nature of any standpoint, and because which we never can grasp the whole of everything there is, of Marcus's points, but also one coming from the nature of the very relation between the subject of the knowledge and the object of the knowledge. This is the issue of reciprocal illumination. Despite the fact that we take knowledge, that the knowledge is a kind of reflection of something outside us, existing independently, what we see is also in part determined by the instrument of seeing or knowing. It is determined by the kind, quote unquote, of the light we direct to objects of our knowledge as it were. If we cast red light on something, it will appear as red. If we cast a light of different color, it will look different. If we substitute the light with a theory, we will have the following situation. If we change the theory, the facts might change also. In principle, there is nothing problematic there. If we change the theory, the consequence will be that we will pick a different set of facts. And this act of replacement of a set of facts with another one does not mean that the facts have changed. Only we change subsets from within the set of what can be the whole of the facts. It means only that some facts have been replaced with some other facts. This is a straightforward explanation of the change at issue. The change has been produced by the change of what has been considered as relevant, which means that the criteria of relevance have been changed. For example, that we increased the level of required plausibility or whatever. However, this is more complex than this. It is not only because we change the criteria of relevance and plausibility in determining what there is, neglecting what we consider as irrelevant, but also because we have to accommodate with what has been already accepted as relevant. And because of that as real. So the acceptance of something as relevant is determined as, by inertia, what will be picked up, chosen from a set of facts as that subset. This means that we might be ready to accept a theory or an explanation of what there is, even if it does not feel all the data. If a theory is internally plausible, fitting with the prevailing or accepted beliefs, we may disregard the data which contradict this picture. And it happens in a way all the time. Our question is, does it mean that this is just coincidence, something which should be taken as a sign of our unfinished work, or is it something necessary and unavoidable? My thesis is that the second is the case. It is necessary and unavoidable, not just the matter of unfinished work, which will be finished in some future. It is the implication of our epistemological condition which we can designate as fallibility and as unavoidable. We accept as the truth of the facts what we can reach or access, and we cannot know if there is something else there, even something near to what we explore and possibly relevant to the matter at issue. We have two sides in the process of knowing, the object of knowing and the knowing subject, and these two are in a relationship of mutual interdependence in whatever should be the result of knowing. So that's reciprocal elimination. There are no raw data preceding to the act of knowing, and independent of it. The knowing subject alters the data to some extent necessarily by using the instrument of knowing. It might look trivial, except that this is the basis for different interpretations of the same. In the realm of brute facts, we can say that this is the matter of precision and vagueness, and certainly to some extent it is the matter of precision and vagueness. Also the matter of the level of required precision or permissible vagueness. So the historical examples of radical or cardinal disagreements might be considered as the examples of steps in scientific progress. Giordano Bruno was right, despite the fact that the prevailing and valid, because being accepted, science of this time rejected his beliefs. Michelson-Morley's experiment in the end has been accepted, although at first it has been met with suspicion and disbelief. Lobachevsky's theory of parallels has become a standard part of the mathematics, although Lobachevsky himself must have paid the price of social ostracism because he was the first to state it. In ethics, it's also relevant, as we know from some pitfalls of utilitarianism in its pretension to be a normative ethical theory, but there's a very interesting issue here, I think. Utilitarian having at its disposal something extremely attractive and irresistible, namely the instrument of universal commensurability. Utilitarianism entails logical implications, among which is the refutability through counterexamples, like punishing innocence and many others, using our basic moral intuitions as the reference frame. But it can be possible, this approach, only if we take utilitarianism as an empirical science, as it were, dealing with natural items. The point is that in the process of acquiring the knowledge, we have some epistemological limits which indicated that we can hardly speak of ontological independence and priority as a plausible and valid theoretical item. So the claim of the primacy of ontology does not seem very informative. Primacy in what sense? In the sense that there must be something there preceding our knowing of it. That does not say much, actually not anything regarding the properties or characteristics of it. There is always not only a certain vagueness present, which could be diminished if not overcome by the progress of science, but there is a possibility that there is something there we never would reach because it is not up to our epistemological tools at all. Well, if ontology is about what there is, we seem to be doomed to stay in an eternal darkness about what it really is. If ontology is about what we can reach by our knowledge, in that case, it seems that epistemology has some kind of primacy, although we may not be prepared to regard it as very important, of course, because the difference of the two, ontology and epistemology, would be only methodological. We have some access to what there is, ontology, by the means of our epistemological tools, of our epistemology. The issue of independence is indicating one other feature of Searle's scheme. Independence is the assertion that we deal here with what Searle and also Kant would call regulative rules and the realm of their possible application. And that's the crucial point, regulative rules, not constitutive rules. Now, we have the point. The realm of possible application of regulative rules does indeed presuppose that there is something existing independent of the rules, that the reality of that upon which the rules are applied is not created by the act of applying the rules, the reality being independent and prior to any of these rules. So, in a way, the premise of ontology is only of the methodological nature. What we have in our entire knowledge is what we find in the world as we can grasp it, or access by our epistemological powers. In that sense, of course, ontology has to be taken seriously as the inventory of everything what there really is, and nothing else beside it. But what else there could be? There are some facts out there, and there are some facts contained in the inventory of everything that we can know. And we think that the two are identical. So the facts that are there, and the facts that are accessible. Those two sets, we suppose, are identical. But we can be sure. We can know everything knowable, and everything that exists is knowable. So we can know everything that exists. But we don't know. There is no necessity perceivable in the notion of the identity of what there is and what can be known. And even if there is such an identity, what in the end will be known is determined not only by what there is to be known, but also by the light we as knowing subjects can cast on that. For any, not only practical, but also explanatory purposes, what there is determined from two sides, ontological and epistemological. There is no visible sense in saying that one of these two sides should have the premise. The premise is pointless in a way. The issue is avoided for the premise. So it seems that reciprocal illumination is a kind of epistemological necessity. We cannot avoid the determination of what we know by the shape, capacity, and other features of our epistemology. As the fallibility is the most basic tenet in that epistemology, it seems that this bears some relevance too. We can adjust our explanations and our theories by those facts that best fit to explanation or the theory, for whichever purposes, which opens a wide area of possible modeling the reality according to what we need or deem suitable. But also there are some limits contained in this very structure of the shape, form, capacity, and nature of our knowing power, making access to whatever there are or might be to be limited, which opens the possibility that there is something that we do not know and perhaps cannot know, as with Kantian undiscerned manifold. It might be redundant to say that whatever this is or might be, it is outside of our legitimate concern, as Kant would say, because it is beyond our reach, except that it makes it impossible for us to say that our ontology have any kind of premise except for our practical concerns. But I have the impression that this was not all what has been meant in introducing this idea of the premise of the ontology. So this might be shortened to the statement that we cannot avoid some vagueness when we deal with facts. Regulation is necessarily imperfect and leaves some room for arbitrariness. The nature is in the process, it is changing, and it is not finished, or at least we have no access to final states of affairs within the nature. Contrary to what we may be inclined to think, the facts in nature are not hard facts, and although independent, they are not constant and unchanging. But the changes are not big ones. They allow predictability. They are small enough to allow us some imperfect kind of predictability, but still predictability, which is a precondition for the possibility to explain and also to regulate. Explanatory statements or sentences function in a way similar to how regulative rules function, by explaining something existent independently in the same way in which regulative rules regulate something that exists prior to their application, which with some margin of vagueness and in an imperfect way. A kind of logical manifestation of this phenomenon is the presence of the possibility of counterexamples. Any theory or hypothesis could be questioned by offering a counterexample, which in the first instance would function like a falsification of the theory or the hypothesis, but in the end usually would lead to their refinement and change. The refinement would normally lead to a new articulation and formulation of the theory, but actually this would mean a new description of the given fact. The fact is the same fact, but its description is now changed, visibly more precise or plausible or relevant and focused. This is not possible within the realm of institutional facts. Although facts as any other, they are not subject to this kind of evaluation. There are no counterexamples. The application of the rules there is quite different from that we have in the realm of brute facts. Institutional facts are much stricter in the sense in which factuality matters. These facts are not vague in this sense, although they might be vague to some presumably lesser extent in cases of conflict of different rules and vagueness and or conflict between the rules, but especially because uncertainties contained in procedures of interpretation and application. But all of this is not unavoidable and could be removed and eliminated eventually. Institutional facts also do exist independently of anyone's knowledge. And here I see importance of the contribution of Ferraris and others regarding documenting. Institutional facts must be provable and demonstrable. And although procedures as the very rules depend on our prior decisions, not decisions, the results might not be known to anyone in any particular point of time. In this respect, they do not differ from brute facts. They do not depend on our prior knowledge. They are there independently from us. Moreover, once enacted, activated, or declared, as we find in both Searle and Ferraris, they are very hard facts with little, if any, vagueness therein. For example, the fact that something is firm, hard to press, is related to many different parameters: the strength of my fingers, the state of that thing, the external temperature, etc. Most or all of which are changeable. On the other side, the fact that I am married, that I won in a game, or that I have promised something to someone are very hard facts independent of any external change in that sense. So they are harder. The institutional facts are stricter, harder than brute facts. So contrary to what Ferrari states, that in the world of natural objects, the essential characteristic is unamendability, what we have here is that institutional facts cannot be subject to external change in an ongoing process of adjusting to a particular requirement. No particular requirement can change those facts. So the question we face here is, do we have the regular situation of the reciprocal elimination in the world of institutional facts as we have in the world of facts representing natural objects? Is our epistemological position in the sphere of institutional facts stronger and more sovereign than in the world of brute facts? In other words, is our fundamental, the most basic epistemological position of fallibility actually overcome in the world of social reality? If yes, we face a very challenging problem here. We know that our knowledge within the context of social facts is partial, incomprehensive, incomplete, imperfect, and amendable, as it is in the realm of natural objects, but the nature of these defects would be quite different. They would not depend on the principled incapacity of our epistemological tools in this area. The fact that we have not the access to the essence, so to say. It doesn't depend on this incapacity in the access to essence. It depends only on the fact that we actually do not have the insight in all relevant parts and aspects of the phenomenon we explore, but not because we have any cardinal limits in approaching those. On the contrary, we can access to everything. The difficulties and obstacles are not coming from the structure of our epistemological powers, but only from the extent to which we manage to control and have at our disposal all the relevant facts and parameters. There is no limitation in accessibility to any of these facts in full. The only demand is to come close enough and see what is going there. If this is so, the sphere of institutional facts would be exempt from the scheme of reciprocal elimination. The price of total accessibility to everything from within this sphere to our cognitive faculties is the absence of any substantial neutrality in the construction of the reality of institutional facts. They are created by our will, but they are not dependent on our backcasting of our cognitive light in the matter of the constitution and construction. No backcast. Once created, they are finished, accomplished facts, which are not changeable in this aspect of being complete and absolute in their epistemological stature. Being well defined by the specific content of a given constitutive rule, they are epistemologically perfect in a way. Even the possible scope of goals and purposes which can play a role in dealing with them is determined in a definitive, conclusive, decisive way. Nothing really open, no new functions, no new usages and applications. In other words, no universality, only particularism and compartmentalism. They are closed, and their reality is, like in the ideal objects, not subject to the ongoing changes, deteriorations, or emendations. They function like ideal, eternal objects. And indeed, the mode of the existence of institutional facts is such. It is sub specie eternitatis. They are not changeable within the time frame of their existing. The institutional facts of which our social reality consists, are definite, hard facts, not subject to our freedom, and also not determined by the reciprocal elimination, which is normally the case with natural facts. Our social reality is a big part of our reality, our world, equally important and in some ways more important to us than the natural part of the reality. It is intermixed with the world of values. and partly consisting of the values, which makes the logic of this part of the reality complex and challenging. We must say that this logic has not been properly investigated, which makes our life much more, but to some extent unnecessarily and avoidable, difficult, coarse, and costly. And this is the point at which we might pass to my other theme, the issue of irreversibility. And the irreversibility is connected with the distinction external-internal. Social reality can be considered as a set of facts. It has to be the facts to be the reality, contained in an inventory of instances, all which began in a particular specified point of time, which is characterized by the feature of irreversibility. Some prior external conditions, seen mentioned in many places in Seoul, are needed also, of course, but despite not being entirely trivial, these conditions are more a kind of preconditions. Or I might say prerequisites, than the real condition. Every social fact has to parasitize or supervene on some brute fact, but that part does not make a part of the reality of that institutional fact. For example, the paper of the banknote is not a part of the reality of the money, and the money carried by some other brute facts, e.g. metal or electronic inscription, is exactly the same fact, the same money as the paper money, not different in however small part, no difference at all. There is no small part of difference. The crucial part is the point of beginning, or on the subsequent points in time needing to be preserved in some way, documented, depend on this first point. We may find that social reality is rather complex, not only in the magnitudes and varieties of its forms, but also in many accompanying features and their combinations. For example, chess or money differ significantly from, and money is an institution, chess or money differ significantly from, let's say, marriage or war, among other things, but less strictness in their rule content in the later ones. Marriage and war is less strict than money or chess. The constitutive rules of the game of chess is stricter and more perfect than the constitutive rules of marriage or war, having really less defined borders in determining what is in and what is out. But to the extent they are institutional facts, and this is the only way for them to exist, they are independent of anyone's believing what exists and what does not exist. The constitutive rule by which they were enacted makes them real and independent once they are there. Collective acceptance and recognition, that's so, is a crucial part of enactment, but actually recognition of rules, not recognition of facts. Once you recognize the rules, the facts follow in a way independently of the fact of recognition. Recognition does not imply approval in any strong sense on the other side, and so had been very upset by the issue of identifying recognition and approval. Of course, it's not the same. But it implies something more than mere acceptance in the sense of enduring. It's not passive, it has to be active. Recognition has some active in its meaning, something that makes those who recognize do more than just admit what has been recognized. It is acknowledged and endorsed or authorized to some extent, even if not approved in a strong sense of being actually for it. It is more than tolerating, certainly. Toleration entails more than enduring. It is an active allowing to others something that is not only unpleasant to us, but also something that we do not approve for ourselves, but allow to others. The issue of collective identity is here relevant, of course. A collective is not just as Searle might have meant, as he said explicitly in making the social work, only sharing of beliefs, or even sharing the desires, or sharing the attitudes. It has to be a capacity to do joint decision making. This capacity to make decisions and per implication to bear responsibility, to be imputable to accountability, and to be subject of evaluation is what makes social reality to be the realm of freedom in a way. Although there is no freedom at all in their factuality. Freedom is up to the point of irreversibility. After that, there is no freedom once enacted, etc. Intentionality so often present in Searle and others, collective or not, and decision-making that follows carry what Searle calls deontic powers, which bring the load of normative capacity to institutional facts, something because of which they have been often confused with values. But they are not values. These are not facts. Collectives with the identity have the power to decide which makes belonging, it's very short exclusion in that direction, which makes belonging to them to become a specific kind of participation, something more than mere membership. They are a form of life. The life could be defined, and that's important, I think, I hope. Anyway, that's my definition of the life. The life is an activity of setting goals and attempting to realize them. But the articulation of this form of the life may vary, may be different. It can be thick, like nation, or for that matter, a state, or family, etc., or thin, like a club or group of fans. It may last for a long time or be short, like short-lived collective, etc. Location is not a necessary feature of being a membership in any collective or community, although many of them are territorial, e.g. cultures, and some, like states, have the territory as a part of the definition. A group walking together in a park is a short-lived collective. A Jewish people is a very long-lived collective. Clashes with the police is a demonstration or a conflict of two distinct collectives, etc. The only powers attached to the collectives make them to have the identity which cannot be reduced to an aggregate, like a queue in front of a desk or a group of people watching a movie in the cinema. I rely on Margaret Gilbert in this part. Collectives are capable to create constitutive rules, and that's why they're important here, pretty much in the same way as individuals. They create, they produce, and they accept or recognize the introduction of constitutive rules, which means freely deciding to enact them after which they become real, through becoming valid, but not before this point. The function of this is rather obvious. It is to freeze the freedom from which these facts come. They come from the freedom, but freedom has become frozen after the irreversible point. They exist because we believe they do, but there are two things there. They came into existence, the institutional facts, because we decided to enact some existing valid constitutive rule. And they continue to exist because we continue to believe that those rules are still valid. The first is the point of irreversibility, the irreversible point, in which an institutional fact starts to exist. And this point changes the world by adding a new fact in it. The second is the duration of this existence, which can be longer or shorter, and within this period of time, what we have as part of the factuality part, is that our freedom to do what we have done in the first irreversible point is cardinally limited, virtually frozen, amputated. It could unfreeze only through a point analogous to the one we had at the beginning, making the end of the fact which has lasted for some time. So the function of institutional facts is actually to control the time, control of our future time, giving something that I would call maximum of predictability, or maximum of possible predictability. This predictability and the maximum of it is making the structure of the social world, which is the process of managing and arranging our acts and practices in a web of what is the factual side of what we do, including the consequences thereof. So when I give a promise, I decided to do something, but that includes that I also decided not to use a subset of reasons and arguments from the whole set of such reasons and arguments that exist, in deciding what to do after I get the promise. amputating that subset from any actual consideration to be potentially used. The important part of the logic of normativity contained here, the one we mentioned above, discussing the absence of counterexample, is that breaking the rule is not a negation of the factuality of the given promise. The fact of existence of reasons against giving a promise does not change anything. For example, if I hesitated to give a promise, having opposing reasons for and against it. The fact that I just forgot certain important reasons, so important that I wouldn't give the promise in the first place at all if I recollected those reasons, does not make any change that the promise is real. It does not make the promise less real and less obliged. This is because the function of the promise is to narrow and restrict the domain of the available reasons in my further decision making, to restrain and narrow our freedom. Social reality is a web of segments, all of which are, and I'm coming to the end now, social reality is a web of segments, all of which are defined by those irreversible points of their enactments after which they start to exist. The concept of irreversible points at the beginning and per hypothesis at the end, although there is a possibility for some institutional facts just to expire upon ceasing to exist of the very institution within which they were facts. In that case, they would just fall out from the institution, but actually it wouldn't be an institution anymore, so there wouldn't be the internal point in which they could constitute themselves as facts. Normally, an institutional fact would cease to exist through revoking the enactment like we have with the laws. This defines what Searle covers by the intentionality and collective intentionality. I think the Ferraris and others are right to introduce the issue of continuation through concepts of documentality, registering, archiving, etc., all of which are focusing to the issue how the institutions and the facts within them actually really exist and continue to exist. The independence of actuality of institutional facts cannot exist without registering, documenting, archiving, data mining procedures, etc. The computerization and globalization of the world through the internet produces only an additional pressure in this area, but although the logic of it was always the same. However, I do not believe that documentality should replace what Searle meant by intentionality. There is no need, and I believe possibility for such replacement. Intentionality is the prerequisite to decide, and without decision-making, institutional facts wouldn't exist in the first place at all. So I do not see a contradiction or a tension between intentionality and documentality. Thank you.